data science, product ops, L&D, so different functions under the product, they roll up to me as an overall portfolio. And I handle the automation and intelligence layer for our order to cash products, which plays a pivotal role in the autonomous offering which we have from HighRadius. Right. So that's a brief about me from a professional standpoint. Pretty humbled by the journey which HighRadius has made from where we started to where we are today, and also humbled by the fact that I got an opportunity to play a role.
Wonderful, Sonali. That's really a very interesting journey. You've been doing this at HighRadius for 8 or 9 years, so you'll have so much perspective to share. Working with the same set of customers and new customers. So we'll come to that in a minute. But let me also go ahead and welcome Ranjini. Ranjini comes with, again, a great experience across Dell, VMware, and a journey that's progressed from leading data science to leading data science and building data products. She has an MBA from MICA. And welcome on board, Ranjini. And maybe if you can speak a little bit about your journey, that would be super useful for us to get started.
Sure, yeah. No, first of all, great to be here, right? Thanks, Anurag, and thanks, Sonali. So as Sonali called out, right, very typical product management background. I started as an engineer as well. I used to code Oracle applications as my first job, right? I did that for a couple of years, and it kind of gives you a good perspective, right, when we start off in a technical role. So I really did enjoy that a lot. But most of the time I realized that I used to figure out, ask questions around why do we do this, right? More than what is it that we're building, why are we asking for these features? And I didn't have answers to most of those at that point in time. And probably that curiosity is where you start off with this PM journey, right? So I went to do my management degree. I majored in marketing, minored in analytics. So kind of explains my interest in numbers, right? Being a very quant person that way. So I started as a product manager with a telecom firm. But for me, I think tech has been a huge area of passion, right? Both for myself as well as bringing other women into technology in itself. So I moved into Dell from there, and we used to take care of product and pricing for Inspiron series laptops, right? Like working with a global team, doing the price elasticity analysis, understanding how should pricing be done for new product launches, things like that. And since from there, I've moved on to VMware. VMware has been like a great journey, right? Like Sonali, I've spent a substantial amount of time over here and have had a chance to set up and grow teams, right? And a large part of my team right now, we lead analytics support for customer experience and success, which means, like Anurag called out, we build data products, we build AI/ML capabilities, which get integrated into proactive support products, right? And it's a very interesting mix having machine learning and products per se, because both of them are like, if you think about it that way, right, huge amounts of learning on both. And there's a lot of new changing, it's a very dynamically evolving space as well. So it's been a great journey. And for me, I think leading a team of data scientists, product managers, my perspective has always been like, you can have the most cutting edge algorithms and models, right? But unless business actually uses it or sees tangible results out of it, unless the end customers see value out of it, right? It's just another model, right? So does it drive reduced churn? Not necessarily just build a churn model. That's been my personal motto as well. And how do we get there? So yeah, with that perspective is what I hope all of you are coming in with as well, right? To how do we drive that value back to the customer? And with that, I think the customer centricity sits very well, right? Like the focus and how most companies, especially high tech, we're moving into that SaaS transformation, focus on the customer and looking at it in a different perspective. So yeah, super exciting topic, super excited to be here as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey, Ranjini. And like you said, it's not about the models, it's not about the AI, it's not about the data, it's about how you create value for the customers. That's so critical, right? And yep, we're really looking forward to you sharing more insights during the next 45 minutes or so. So, it's a very interesting world we live in, right? A world where customers, in most cases, are spoiled for choice, right? And there was this recent PwC study which said that 1 in 3 customers would leave their favorite brand or the brand they're loyal to if they had one bad experience, that is, right? So that just shows how important it is for customers to really have a great experience with the company or the brand that they're dealing with. Even more importantly, for them to feel valued, right? And that comes back to the question that comes back to executives, to brands, to leaders, and say, hey, we all want to be customer centric, right? But it's easier said than done, like I mentioned at the beginning. So my first question then, therefore, is maybe to you, Sonali, what does it mean to be truly customer centric, right? And why is it so hard for brands to be known as a customer centric brand? I mean, we can literally count them on our fingers. If someone were to ask us in the first 30 seconds, you probably call out 3 or 4 names, but then you start slowly struggling, right? So share with us your perspective on what it means to be customer centric and why is it so much harder these days?
Sure. I think wonderfully mentioned the data points, Anurag. So now coming to, customer centricity, right? So I think what happens is generally, whether you're part of a product team or building an application, building a solution, it's very easy to be output driven, right? But very difficult to be outcome driven, right? So when I say output versus outcome, maybe I'll explain that, right? So if a product team can be always driven by, okay, how do I build the next better version of my product, right? Is my delivery happening on time? Is it quality driven delivery? Am I adding a bunch of new functionalities, new features, features which are powered by new gen technologies and whatnot, right? But that is all output. That's not outcome, right? The outcome comes in when you start focusing upon, hey, how does my NPS score look like, right? Or how is the usage pattern? How is the usage percentages? Is the user actually using, like Ranjini was mentioning, are they actually using the model which has been developed, and are they really getting value out of it? And then if your product is supposed to deliver a certain value for the customer, whatever it is, whether it is efficiency improvement, effectiveness improvement, are you really contributing to that efficiency or effectiveness improvement, right? So being customer centric is about building a product, okay, which can eventually impact the outcomes, right? And whenever you're building, whether it's a feature or you're prioritizing an initiative, if you're focused on these outcome metrics versus an output metrics, that leads you to a customer centric mindset. But it's, as you said, it's easier said than done. It needs a huge discipline in the mind, because every time you're planning a product release, every time you're planning the annual plan of your product, you need to keep these metrics, and you also need to invest yourself to understand the customer's needs, pain points. And most often it becomes difficult then, because when you go and understand the customer pain point, it's very easy to take the as is and then say, okay, let me translate it to requirements and build whatever the customer asked for. But that's also a pitfall, right? That's not the right thing to do. So customer centricity is not about building features that the customer asked for, but it is about understanding the customer's behaviors, pain points, aspirations, coming up with a very data-driven methodology to get to the elemental level of truth, right, of what the requirement is, so that there are no more whys remaining. You've understood it the best. And then coming up with solutions and making sure that even before you build the solution, you make sure that you have a touch point with the customer, right? You have literally gone and validated, hey, here is what I'm thinking, here is the value, are you aligned, are you not aligned? So having those early adopter customers, right? And then working very closely, even after the customer starts using your product, to continuously discover what's changing and what makes sense to be added in your product eventually, right? And that's where a very close collaboration, especially if you have a customer value team in the organization and product team, is essential to create a customer-centric culture, right? Now, to wrap up my point of view, I will say basic things, which there are a lot of aspiring product managers or young product managers on this call. Basic things like, going and looking at your support tickets, going and looking at your enhancement requests, going and looking at what gaps are coming during your implementation process, or what are the users talking about your product, how is the usage percentage, how are the user interviews trending to be, will give you a lot of data or insights to come up with that customer-centric mindset. But do not fall into the pitfall also of build what the customer asks, but build what the customer will get as a value add, right? So I'll pause here.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, Sonali. I mean, some very, very valid points, right? Outcome versus output, right? The importance of having customers participate and doing early validation. and also going to them and getting feedback early on, right? I think these are great points, and we'll come back to that. And you used a key term, collaboration, right? That's so intrinsic to this whole process of building great products. Ranjini, there is this study by HubSpot which says that companies who say that customer centricity is a fundamental element of their mission, right? Or key core values are 60% more profitable than companies who don't say that, right? Now you play with data, you're building some great data products and models. When you look at it from your lens, what is customer centricity for you and your team? And why, again, the same question, why is it harder for companies to run down that entire stretch of being customer centric for a long time? Why is it so much harder?
Right. Yeah. No. Great points, right, in terms of statistics which you have added. Yeah, I think I remember reading that, even customers are willing to buy more. I think probably 85% of buyers will pay more for a better experience, right? So that's the value of it in itself. Now, to your point, right, most of the time you may have it in a value statement, you may have it in a mission statement, but that in itself doesn't translate. Now, why? That's the question, right? Now, one thing people tend to, confuse between is customer experience value and customer centricity, right? Having a great customer experience is absolutely critical, right? But that doesn't alone make customer centricity. And I probably want to share this quick story, right? I think I was reading this. There's a book, by the way, on this topic called Customer Centricity. It's by Peter Fader. Would highly recommend. I think it's been a while since I read, but I remember the story from there. There's this company, online retailer, NASSCOM, not just online. I think they do have offline as well, but it's a huge retailer, right? NASSCOM in US, and I think one of the legend goes that sometime in 1970s, there was this person who walked into the store, right? And he had this broken down tires, and he said, "You know what? I'm very unhappy with this." And NASSCOM is one of those companies which is famed for customer centricity, right, and customer experience, and they were like, they took this back without no questions asked. The surprising thing is that they did not sell tires at all. Forget about selling tires to that customer. They never sold tires as a company, right? Now, the author goes on to say, oh, is this great thing, right? The customer is always right. Then he clarifies that maybe not necessarily, right? It's not about, is the customer always right? Rather, the right customer is right? Is your actual customer right? So that differentiation is probably what needs to come into perspective. So that's one, right? So identifying who are your most valuable customers and then building products which are valuable for them, right? That's the strategy, and that's the customer centricity aspect of it. The second thing is maybe more around the move into the experience economy. You see this across, right? Across retailers, across companies, more so in the technology domain in itself. And if you think about what it is, think about how we drive value over a period of time, right? The progression of economic value. We started with very undifferentiated commodities, right? Then we moved into goods. Then we moved into delivering services. Now we are delivering experiences. So if I were to give an example again, maybe we used to there is like coffee beans, right? Where you just have packaged coffee beans and you package them and sell it to them as, okay, these are coffee beans or coffee powder. And then you probably have a stall where you can go buy coffee, right, which is selling services. Now you have Starbucks, which is creating an experience. It's not just about coffee, right? You're selling an experience. So the overall journey in itself is because you're taking that customer centricity perspective in terms of, okay, what is it that we are delivering for the customer versus what is it that I am having as a product and how do I reach it to the customer, right? So the move to that experience economy is probably the second one. So bottom line, I think successful organizations across sectors realize that, for higher retention rates, more referrals, more price premiums, and greater revenue, this is a strategy which is a must, right? Not just a good to have. And I think I remember one more statistics from the book that, acquiring a new customer is 5 to 25 times more expensive than retaining an existing one. And that kind of underscores why companies probably prioritize, retention over acquisition and customer centric behavior versus, product centric behavior. So I'm going to wrap it up with that, right? So having that net, having the differentiation between customer experience alone and customer centricity, and why we are moving towards that, and how the knowledge economy and experience economy is driving us towards that.
No, absolutely. I mean, the whole importance of customer experience and what you said about customer centric versus product centric. I'm going to pick that up, and I'm going to put a question to you, Sonali. There are a lot of aspiring product managers, young product managers on this call, and seasoned folks as well. What is the difference between a customer centric approach to product management versus any other traditional approaches that have been used or applied by a lot of these organizations?
Yeah, so I think before I get into the differences, I would just want to clarify one thing, because that's where people mostly get confused. So the traditional approach was always product centric, like you rightly mentioned, and the newer approach is customer centric. Both traditional product centric approach and customer centric approach do focus on building the quality product, right? Because without that, you can't. Then that's like the basic thing. Without that, you can't. However, there is a difference in the approach, right? So the approach is, in the traditional approach, the assumption there is the customer will not know. Like even if you go and read what Steve Jobs says or anyone, right? So basic assumption is, okay, the customer will not know what they want, right? And we would have to go and create those needs or opportunities for them. Right? So that is how it starts. However, when it comes to customer-centric approach, the assumption there is the customer knows their needs, but they may not be able to articulate it to you in the most structured way. A. And B, the customer will not be able to give you solutions. You should never bank upon the customer to get the solutions, but you should still differentiate between the needs and the solutions which the customer is speaking to you about, right? So traditionally, the product-centric approach used to be, okay, assume that the customer doesn't know much about their needs. Do talk to them, but more with the perspective of, okay, there will be things which they do not know. Think about what is that new experience or new product or, which you can bring to them, whether, and if you feel that it adds value, then let us work with the customer to create that as a habit or an experience or give them training. And then finally the users get used to it, right? And that's nothing wrong, right? But that's how a lot of great products have also got created. But I think what's happening with the customer centric approach is it's a little bit of twist to the same story, but now you put customer in the center of every decision which you make, right? Starting from, like Ranjini was mentioning, which customer you really want to target upon, right? There are many customers. Now, when you go and talk to the customers, there are 100 problems you will come across. Which problems you want to pick and why, right? And what is that why should not be based upon the answer should not be there, oh, this is a wonderful product enhancement or wonderful technology upgrade, but the answer should there be, okay, wow, this is an amazing problem statement which will give my user a uptick of 50% productivity or usability or something like that, right? So that the value part is more driven by customer versus driven by whether it's a fancy or great technology upgrade, right? So that's how it is, going between what used to be, initially more like an internal discovery, like I'll sit in R&D labs and conceptualize and visualize, versus now you go make the customer play a partner in your discovery phase, right? Have them as partners in the early phase so that you have the opportunity to even, build a product which will definitely get at least some adoption, right? Because you have already those initial people out there, right? So that is the first difference. The second thing which I feel is a lot of focus has now gone, also because we have got a lot of technology now, on studying the usage patterns and the value and doing a closed loop decision on the continuous discovery, which earlier was more of like, okay, I've launched the product, let me go build more features and make it the best product. But now it is like, okay, I don't need to build a lot of features to make my customer happy. It might be simple things like a performance upgrade, or it might be just a user training, which can, or might be just a experience or the, of how the overall UI looks like, which can even give an amazing customer value or benefit, right? You still need features, but then the focus has now more turned into, thinking from a customer perspective, what makes sense and whether it will add value. Right. So that closed loop thinking has also come in. So these are at a macro level, two parts through which the traditional product centric approach and the customer centric approach are widely varying by. I hope that answers and gives some insights, Anurag.
Absolutely. I mean, amazing. I think the way you put it, customer being at the core of all decision making, and B, not saying, hey, this is the next cool feature, or this is AI that's being put into practice, but actually what's the value you're generating for the customer, right? 50% increase in productivity, or the bottom line getting impacted, or the top line, right? I mean, that is so critical because that's what customers value. Yeah. So Ranjini, you have this awesome team that works on data models. You build some great data products. How does all of this come into play when you put the customer-centric approach towards building, great experiences for your customers?
Yeah, I think most of what the customer centricity is now and what it's going to drive is powered by data, right? So definitely, we'll talk a bit more about that, right? But what I did want to start with is, see, think about a bank or insurance or anyone you've called in the past, right? In the past, you would have had an account number for each account, and then you'll interact with like multiple representatives for each, right? So then what happens is these processes, experiences, therefore data, all of it's siloed and it's very choppy as a result, right? So same information you might have shared like 10 different times, right? Or you might have received information about products you don't even own, right? How many times have we called phone companies and repeated the issues? I personally repeated the same issue like 7 times before I got a resolution, right? Versus on the other hand, someone who does have your 360-degree view of your data in itself and who you are as a customer persona. I think there was this example of how Audible, Amazon, right? Audible, they called a customer and they said, you haven't been using your credits which you get in Audible for quite a long time. Is this something which you will continue to use? Otherwise, I can refund this to you, right? So that level of information about a customer is required for you to be customer centric, right? Or even simple things like, how thinking from the perspective of like how Sonali said, putting the customer at the core and thinking from their perspective. Morning, I was trying to log in for an exam for my 6-year-old daughter, right? And the student login was 3 levels down from the main website itself. So even that simple thing is not putting the customer up front, right? It took me like 10 minutes to just figure out where it is. So this inefficiencies and poor customer experiences, if you think about it, right, it's because of this traditional org structures based on, individual product lines that were sold, right? And it is not that it doesn't take into account customer preferences, but if you think about marketing, for example, right, there's this pray and pray kind of campaign, right? So you try to push out notifications to as many number of people as possible and see whether you get a response. Now, the problem with these kind of approaches is it wastes valuable time, right? Time, mind share, and most likely it misses the majority of the target audience to whom it is addressed, right? So how do you create strategies, processes to focus on the customer over the product? And therefore that becomes a critical step. And to do that, having your data infrastructure in place, making sure that you are collecting, enriching, cleaning, putting them together, having that customer personas, that becomes absolutely critical. I think there was a statistic that less than 14% of organizations actually have good, clean data, right? So yes, they are building towards it, but that becomes more critical. And we should probably talk a bit more about the need of data in itself and how does this drive customer centricity, because absolutely, right? If you don't know what processes are collected, what data is collected across different processes, different infrastructures, different touch points, how do they come together? Do they talk to each other, right? It becomes there's no AI to it, right? That's a second level. Even just bringing them together is required for you to have a single customer persona to say, okay, this is what you did as a customer, right? This is how I can help you. So absolutely critical that way, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So the whole point you made around the 360-degree view of the customer, right? And different functions working in silos. I mean, we all are so used to that, right?
Yeah.
Repetitive
Right.
calls from some of the big brands itself, right?
Mm.
But the also importance of having clean data, right, on your customer.
Yep.
Now, all of this really becomes very, very handy when you want to build and give a good customer experience to your customers. Now, at VMware, you guys have been doing some phenomenal job building products, right? So for this audience, which comprises of people who want to build products and want to build great products, right? Can you bring it to life for us with an example, a personal example, or an example at VMware where you took this approach and helped deliver a great product? And then what was the value or the outcome for the customer?
Yeah, no, I'll probably give a bunch of examples, right? There are a lot of great companies doing great work on this, and we definitely have been on this track of, getting our data products certified, curated, and present, right? So maybe let's start with that, right? So one of the things, as we rightly called out, is to have that, you're moving from a reactive to a preemptive to a proactive support, for example, right? To do that, you need to understand what issues will happen before they happen. To know that, you need to have all of the systems talking to each other, right? You need to have customer identifiers which can connect with each other. So all of that needs to come in one place, right? Second thing is cutting down on the time taken. So most of the time when we are working with data, right, you will end up having different teams working on the same problems. You start with the same thing and bring it up, right? So it's important to create reusable artifacts. So what we have been working on as a strategy is to make sure that we curate, certify, and bring all of this data into one place, right? So that we can build these reusable artifacts, which is what constitutes data products, right? In general, apart from that in itself, if you were to look at industries and how do they tackle this, right? I think putting the customer feedback at the top is one of the things which we do, and many companies like Slack does very well as well, right? And therefore, if you think about it, I think they focus on gauging success not just in sales but also in NPS and CES scores, right? Customer experience scores, and that's right, because otherwise it's just going to be in your vision statement, and unless you measure and prioritize it, it's not going to be managed, right? Or think across different teams itself. So for example, if there are organizations where they would have focus across marketing, sales, and customer success. So for example, within marketing, if you were to bring all of this together, it allows you to do targeted lead generations, segment specific campaigns, personalized content, which can help improve experience, loyalty, right? For example, I get calls for like health insurance every single week, right? Even though I've called out that, I don't want a bank loan. I don't want this health insurance because it is not valid for me. Just think about how that conversation will be if it were to be personalized for my needs. If someone were to come and tell me, okay, I understand, maybe you do have it, but what about your parents? Is this something which you could consider? Are these areas? So that personalization absolutely changes the way we look at marketing, or even sales for that matter, right? For any sales team to do well, they need to have holistic customer view. How can they upsell, cross-sell opportunities, even for that? Or finally, for customer success itself, right? And most SaaS tech companies have a focus on customer success, including ourselves. So it requires you to have a complete snapshot of the user profile so that they can identify and predict churn much before, right? And act proactively to address that churn. So across all of these areas, across all of these segments, across your organization, to bring them together, you need to have that data-driven insights and bring them together as a strategy for us to move forth on this.
No, excellent, excellent. I think that was so vivid, and you explained the entire process. So I'm sure the audience listening into this, you're going to find this very handy. And I'll also take this opportunity to encourage you to ask any questions either on the Slack channel or on the chat over here. Moving on, so Sonali, let me ask you the same question, right? You guys have more than 700 leading companies as your clients, right? And at the end of the day, you're building products that really make a big difference to these organizations, to these enterprises. So walk us through an example or one or two success stories for your customers when you were building these products for them.
Sure. Yeah. So Anurag, the one thing which I would want to start with is, while I tell you about my journey, probably one of the reasons why we have been able to grow to the 700 plus customers, like you mentioned, is two things, right? One of our culture values, as I was mentioning in the beginning, is ride or die with the customer. And one of our leadership principles is having maniacal focus on customer value. And each department and every leader or manager actually gets rated on these two principles, along with others, of course, to see where we stand, right? So that is just to tell you how customer focused this company is. But now coming to some true examples, right? I'll probably give you two examples here. One is when we were working on an analytics offering of our product. Often you feel that, okay, when it comes to analytics and reporting, people need this fancy reports, you try to bring in the best representation and, visually represent the charts and, in a very, beautiful way, attractive way. There's so many widgets available now. And probably that will help us, get the attention of the customers. That was a normal, thinking. Obviously, you need data, accuracy of data, and then a wonderful representation. When we went and did our discovery with the clients, the users, even before launching this product, we realized that, well, the customer's main pain point is not getting a view of the reports accurately, but it is about building high performing teams, right? So if I think of a director of collections, a director of credit, or a CFO, they want to build a very high performing team. And how would you build a high performing team? You want to give visibility about each other's performance and create a performance competition, kind of a self, everyone's performance is visible. You give them visibility, and B, you probably use that as a parameter to very simply say what is my plan versus what is my actual, without having to interpret those reports a lot, right? And the third conclusion which we had is people really don't look for very, especially at the senior level, very fancy stuff, but they look for extreme simplified view of those facts, so that they don't have to use their brain power to process what the graph is representing or saying, right? Using these three different insights, we launched a product called Dot1 Performance, which is one of our analytics offering, which aims at fulfilling this creating this high performing culture. And recently, because of some of these additions, we have got some early customer feedback, which was really promising, right? As an example. So just see the shift from where it started to where the focus went because of the customer experience. I'll give you a second example here. When you go to HighRadius website, you'll hear a lot about autonomous software. And we were launching autonomous software in 2018 time. When we were building this, I was part of this main initiative myself with the team. So when we were building this, the objective there was to build a next level user experience, which is powered by data and intelligence and puts the user almost in a cruise control mode, right? So that for at least some of the use cases, wherein almost the user, the UI and the digital assistant is actually guiding the user versus they having to think what to do next and make them more effective. That was the purpose. So it seemed like a mission to Mars project, just by even when I probably explained, it must have seemed like a mission to Mars project. Okay, you're trying to almost bring cruise control mode and whatnot, right? And it had the risks of becoming a science project. So what we did there is we said, okay, we're not going to build anything unless we go and really talk to the customers, right? So it started as a concept. We went to the customers. We did a very heavy, we identified some couple of customers who could be our early friends or, collaborators in this innovation. Did a lot of as-is research with them, literally deep research to conclude what should be the use cases which we should pick. And we didn't pick every use case. We picked one use case which can make a difference. And then we picked that one use case, went deeper, came up with the info flows. Even when the info flows, or basically the user experience journey, was getting built, we were in close collaboration with these clients to validate whether this gives them the aha factor or not. We were not dependent on them to get the solutions, but we were validating them. The end result was the product got launched. The product team continued to be in very close collaboration with these users who were the early adopters, to study the usage patterns and give them specific insights on how they can improve, to the extent shadowing the users while they're using our product throughout the whole day, to see where is the actual issue happening and what could be that continuous discovery. End result, what happened is we got a lot of appreciations for what we did as part of the autonomous product launch. But not only that, we today even have a lot of users actually using the product, even though it seemed like a Mission Mars thing, and they're getting value out of it, right? So what I'm trying to, in essence, say is, I was trying to describe the journey that even if you are trying to build a huge innovation or a Mission Mars project, it can still be customer focused, and it doesn't necessarily need to be just one way around, right? And I'll leave you with this thought process, which Ranjini was, I think, briefly mentioning, which I really liked, and so I'm picking it from her, is even when it comes to customer support or, it's very important to ensure that all the customer focused teams, whether it's customer support, customer value, consulting, and how do we make them proactive, right? Proactive enough to serve the customers better. So even there, a lot of success stories come in, right? How do I reduce my implementation time, or how do I give a better experience while after their life? If the customer is facing an issue, it's not like there will never be an issue. There will be an issue. But how do we, identify or come up with tools which will enable my customer operations or support or, team to to perform better, right? Or to proactively notify the client that, hey, you will not see this data today because so and so thing failed and we're working on it and we'll get back, versus waiting for the customer to raise a ticket and then responding to it. So those are the kind of initiatives also which has really helped us from where we are. So I'll pause there, but I hope it gives you a good perspective of some of the real stories from, and not just theory.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I was almost visualizing the entire journey that you were kind of talking about, right? Of how you go about meeting customers and working with them to build these products, right? But it reminds me of this whole thing, like Ranjini and you mentioned, of working with different departments, having one view, right? One of my CEOs once told me, and he was addressing the entire town hall after that, and he said, solving for customers' pain point is everyone's problem. It's not customer support. It's not the sales guy on the ground. It's not the product teams. It's everyone's duty to solve that. Yeah. And that's the paradigm. I mean, culturally, if you think about it, and that's at the core of your culture, it actually just goes ahead and percolates the entire organization. And then you're just looking at it from a very different mindset. Yeah. Now, we've been talking about companies such as Amazon, Ranjini talked about Nordstrom. We know companies such as Starbucks, Hilton's, and so many others, big names, etc. But we also know that there are startups that are doing an amazing job, starting from think of the customers first and then coming in and disrupting that space, right? One challenge that startups face, right, is oftentimes they don't have many people, they don't have big budgets, right? Time is a constraint, they want to quickly launch, learn. So how would you advocate to them that how can they put in a leaner customer-centric approach to go ahead and solve those problems for customers? Maybe Sonali, let's start with you, and then Ranjini, your views.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, so I think you brought up a very valid point, and that takes me probably to 10 years back, almost 10 years back when I started my journey even with HighRadius. We were not that big now, but I understand we are talking about startups. You're even talking about 1%, 2%, 5 people, which is much more leaner than even like 100 people organization. So my recommendation would be prioritize, right? When you're conceptualizing the product or the service, whatever you want to build or your idea, you will always come up with 50 different ideas when you are thinking in your mind, right? Always try to first, I think about what is that one idea or one thing which I want to work upon, right? And then take that idea and then figure out who can be my probable customer. Is it students? Is it working in certain departments in certain corporates? Is it any user like you and me, like or what it is, right? Or is that and what is that specific need of those people, right? I mean, for example, if I just think of a pencil as an example, right? So you have kids who are the maximum consumer of pencils, but you also have artists who use pencils as an example, right? So who are you targeting is very important, so that you are very focused on that subset and you're not wasting time. The second thing which I will say is, even though it might seem as a big exercise, I would highly encourage a lean team to go talk to the customer yourself, like spend that time ahead in the curve versus getting into a build trap where you build a product and then it is far more cost wastage at the end. So it might seem like you're spending a lot of time ahead, not building product and talking to customers, but that will just save you time because you will know exactly what is that thing to build to give you that first milestone, right? Then when you talk to customers, you will always get multiple viewpoints, right? I mean, it's like kid in a candy store. Your customer or the user is like a kid in the candy store when you're talking to them. So they will come and tell you 100 things. Now, which one thing or two thing you need to prioritize is where quantification will come in, right? When you in your mind, and you should validate that with them, right? Which is that one activity where they spend 50% of the time, or which is that one activity which is the biggest pain point for them, and are you really trying to address it, right? That guidance will help you. It's like scarcity technique, right? If you can just do one thing, one pain point, what would be that? So use that to identify. So you're identifying the niche target customer. You are next identifying that one problem which you need to solve using a scarcity technique. And then you're going deeper on that problem. And there also you are trying to identify that one use case within that problem area, which will help you hit the milestone. And if you're this will help you get there. And then for the first 1 to 5 to 10, the customers, based on whether you're in a B2C or a B2B world, I would say, even if it is difficult, have a discipline of going and talking to them once in every 15 days, 10 days. I myself have done it. I used to talk to, we didn't have a customer support team to begin with, as an example, because we were a very small company when I joined. I myself used to go and talk to customers once in every 15 days to get a perspective of what's happening. Look at the, you don't need a support system, but you need to answer the customer queries yourself to be able to understand what's happening. So that's how I will say, take it milestone by milestone. And then when you feel you have a sizable chunk where you need to have a dedicated person for that, then go hire a person who can be focused just on doing the customer experience stuff or talking to the customers and finding out. That is the thought process I will leave with. It will help you prevent high cost, low value areas, right? It will help you go to either high value, low cost areas or high value, high cost areas, but it will definitely prevent you from working upon high cost, low value areas, right? So it is worth it solving the customer in a customer focused way.
Now that's great. These are pearls of wisdom, folks who are listening in, from an accomplished product leader who's been there, done that, and started off her journey with a startup, right? Ranjini, your thoughts for startups. What would you love to share with them?
Great points, right, Sonali? So when you think about what is the minimum possible I should be doing as a startup, right? At any point in time, prioritizing driving value for the customer. Like everything else is miscellaneous, right? And honestly, there have been so many of them who have done a great job with this. So I recently can think of this example of just college students who started with this venture 2-3 years ago, right? Probably not going to name them, but if you have bought insurance online, right? The minute you register your number, and I'm sometimes so hesitant to provide my number because the minute I register my number, even before I leave the room, there are 10 calls which I get, right? And these are from people who just want me to finish that transaction, right? But as if I'm buying this, I have questions. Is this right for me? Should I be buying it for myself? Should I be buying? So there are a lot of questions, right? But the focus is more on getting the transaction done versus actually does it solve my problem per se, right? Now, as versus that, there have been these bunch of young kids who just came up with something absolutely new. And their only goal over there, when I reached out to them, was, can I solve your problem, right? Will I continue with them versus will I continue with the established player? Absolutely the latter, right? So did they have all of those fancy budgets? Did they have a fancy URL? Did they have fancy social media? Absolutely not. But the one thing that they did well was they solved my problem, right? And it maybe there are people who could be a different target audience, but probably I was their target audience, right? So figure out who's your target audience, solve the problem. That's your MVP, right? Everything else is miscellaneous. So to add to Sonali's point, right, I think the biggest challenge for any startup is trying to build a product for everyone. Absolutely not, right? It's a common misconception that way, that you should try to satisfy all your users, right? But by building a product for almost everyone, you certainly end up building a product that no one will use and then ultimately hurt the product itself. So figure out who are your most engaged users and then build that product for those most engaged users, and as a focus on creating that great customer experience, right? There's no magic, there's no gimmicks. That's just that core thing which you need to solve for, right? So that's one. Second thing is, there's also this misconception that, oh, you know what, I'm not doing well, so all good products also go through troubled times, right? Everyone does, right? And that's a truth. So everyone has problems with churn. They could be new user acquisition, engagement problems, but again, the core is the same thing, right? Are your core users, and that's why it's important to identify who you're building for, who your core users are. Are they engaged? Are they continuing to be engaged, right? That is critical for you to eventually get to the product market fit. And third thing, right? Again, your North Star. What are your North Star KPIs, right? And it's so important to define your North Star and what product success means to you, right? If I were to Google it up, there'll be like 30 odd KPIs I can find. But then if I'm going to measure myself against all of them, I'm not going to hit any of them, right? Or they could be vanity metrics in terms of number of likes. Do you want to go after that? Maybe not, right? So what does success mean to you, right? We spoke about a bunch of metrics earlier. So is it your customer satisfaction? Is it your customer lifetime value? What does it mean to you, right? Identifying what is working and not working for your product. Are they growing? Are the users being retained? Is your product sticky enough? Are your new cohorts of customers, doing as well as your old cohorts, right? People engaging with your products. So I think these fundamental things remain the same for all startups, and focusing on this is what good products do. They grow well because they penetrate the market, retain and engage their co-users, right? And bring their users back regularly with a healthy content. So I think that focus is probably the third thing I want to leave you with. And finally, because I am passionate about data and ML, right? Data is the biggest challenge. And if you think about it, right, in larger companies, the way it is unorganized is because it's grown erratically, right? Like it's siloed, duplicated, and it can be a mess. So that's because sometimes that's how the companies grow over time, right? But then when you are starting off as a startup, you have that, you have that you can be cognizant of that, right? While maybe you don't want to invest in it, but then be cognizant of how you're setting up your processes and systems, and how you can therefore set up a foundation for you to build on this as you go forth, right? So those are 3-4 areas which I would definitely leave with startups to think about, right, as they grow in this and scale in this area.
Yeah, great insights again, from figuring out who's your target audience, who are your core set of customers, to totally understanding the key problems they have, prioritizing, doing the MVP, and vanity metrics. I think that was such a solid point, Ranjini, because sometimes you just look at so many different metrics, right? And you lose track of what you were trying to do. So the importance of identifying those customer success metrics is so vital to getting it right. Yeah. We've talked about this a lot, customer centricity, and at the end of the day, all of us really, really care about our customers. But oftentimes you run into the pitfall of trying to build everything for a customer, right? And, one example that comes to my mind is, I had someone in my team who was totally obsessed about customers in the right way. And he went out there into the field and spent a lot of time with them, and came back with an MVP, which seemed like it would take 12 months to build that MVP, because that had all these features that customers wanted. So to Sonali's point earlier, sometimes customers don't know what they want, right? And distilling it and figuring out what needs to be built is so important. And to your point, Ranjini, you can't build everything, right? You need to start with an MVP. So maybe my last question would be that, what are some of the common pitfalls to avoid as you try to build products that will solve problems for your customers? So maybe, Ranjini, starting with you, any 2 or 3 things that you think our PMs or entrepreneurs should be looking out for so that they get it right and don't hit these general challenges?
Yeah, so sometimes, you use some products or you come across something and didn't, at the back of mind, if you're a PM, you kind of think, oh, this is something which probably doesn't resonate, right? So things like that is probably what I want to call out, right? One is just relying on demographics to understand customers. I know we have been doing that for a very long time, right? 10 to 15 years, so, 15 to 30 years, so on and so forth, right? And I'm not saying it's absolutely not worthwhile at all, but that doesn't serve the purpose alone, right? You can take 2 30-year-olds and look at how differently they behave. So don't focus on that alone. Second thing is growth tactics, right? And if there are startups here, they probably do understand this, right? So for example, you can always have, startups who measure DAU, daily active users, monthly active users, right? You can always send notifications and bring the customers back, right? It probably is going to show you as active usage because it's going to hit your system saying, okay, customers came back, right? But it is not helpful in the long run, right? Without your customers coming back willingly and having that stickiness, that's not going to work out in the long run, right? And I see like a lot of startups do that as well, right? Focus a lot on growth tactics alone. And it can be helpful if you already have a product market fit. Otherwise, it doesn't solve the problems for a product market fit, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is growing quickly at all costs, right? Like growing sustainably is one thing, but growing quickly at all costs definitely doesn't help. A few more which I can think of is think of experience as an investment. I remember reading the statement somewhere, and I think it makes so much of sense, right? We always think of it as a cost. Oh, we have to do this because we have to provide customers experience. No, absolutely not. It's an investment which we are making for ourselves as well, right? Because it pays back in terms of its ROI. And maybe the last one is focus on your current customers. Like I sometimes it astounds me as to how easily brands give up or companies give up on existing customers. Just acquiring one new customer, net new customer, is so difficult, and it's very expensive as well. So why would you not go all out and do everything possible to retain your existing customers, right? So focus on that, because most of the time your existing customers can continue to grow and add up to your overall bottom lines, right? So I think those are things which I would leave you with, right, in terms of what you should avoid as pitfalls.
Great inputs. Sonali?
Sure. All right, so I'll add a couple more points, but I think my favorite one still remains the same. I would say do not fall into the bill trap. There is actually a very good book called as Escaping the Bill Trap. If anyone is interested, you should definitely go and read that book or read the summary of that book. What does that mean is, please don't go and build, like Anurag was mentioning, anything and everything that the customer asks. There is something called as customer stated objective, and there is something called as pure business requirement. So please be very well aware about what is the customer trying to ask is a customer stated objective, and you need to get to the pure business requirement. So please don't go build. That is the first thing. The second thing is, be careful on the data which you are processing, whether it's coming from your as is interviews or data, because data is as good as it is true and accurate. Data is a golden weapon, but if data is not accurate, or you are looking at the data which is literally, your data might say, okay, 50% of my users are not using this. If it sounds counterintuitive, please question why and relook at the data again, because in case that pointer which you got is wrong, your entire assumption will go for a wrong toss, right? So make sure that you're doing the assumption test well, otherwise you'll fall into your assumptions as pitfalls, right? That's the second thing. The third thing is, often I observe that people get into a very transactional mode, especially when we ask them to be customer centric, in the sense, I need to ensure that all the tickets are answered within a certain SLA. I need to support my customer support team. So let me go do whatever they require to solve the problem. But then you need to sit back and think, how can I avoid those tickets from coming over, right? Or how can I ensure that proactively those tickets are even prevented, right? Even before even we communicate, or even the system can handle, or maybe the system should handle it by itself, right? So getting to those insights is much more important than being very transactional and just making the customer happy, right? Because it's a short term versus long term. The next is being able to differentiate between business metrics and customer metrics, right? So what matters to us as you as a company might not be the same thing that matters to your customers. Like NPS score matters to you as a company, or to me as a company, but it might not matter to my customer, right? To my customer, it is more about, okay, am I getting an efficiency improvement? Am I getting an effectiveness improvement? Is it affecting my DSO? If that is a metric which I'm tracking. So please do make sure that you differentiate between that, and you don't fall into the pitfall of just improving business metrics or just improving customer metrics. Often you have to do a balance of both, right? And that is important. The last thing I want to leave you with is, being customer centric doesn't mean overspending a lot on the costs ahead of time. For example, if you are just a 1 member, 2 member, 3 member, 5 member team, you've not even got your first customer, you don't need to go and buy a tool like a Pendo or a Gainsight or something to to learn about your customer experiences. You can find out some easy alternative to that by doing a query on your data sets or whatever, to be able to get to that information, as an example. Or if you aspire to be an international customer, you want to build an amazing user manual which the users can use, you want to spend money on a documentation team which can write it for you, you want to spend money on doing the translation of those documentation so that anyone can use it. But again, how much and who you need to invest upon is also important, based on at what stage is your company. So make the cost investments also in a very prioritized way. You don't need to go and overspend on costs ahead of time just because you have to be customer centric. Rather, I would say prioritize. I think the easiest way of being customer centric is picking up a call and talking to your customer by yourself, or even using simple tools like Google Forms or whatever to get put a survey, get feedback, or query your own database to get some insights. And then obviously, as you scale, you would have to invest on some of those tools, people, methodology, and that should only happen as it requires and not in the beginning, right? So those are the important pitfalls which I wanted to highlight, Anurag.
No, absolutely great. These are such real practical insights, both from Ranjini and Sonali. And nothing beats picking up the phone and calling the user if you can, right? Or the customer. What you will hear from them is going to help you so much more than beating about the bush and figuring out other ways. But absolutely important and great examples of what you can avoid doing in this journey. We don't have too much time left, so I'll quickly look at the questions that we have on the chat and Q&A. I think most of the questions on chat have been answered by Ranjini and Sonali, but maybe 2 questions on the Q&A. Maybe the first question, this is for you, Sonali. I think you probably may be able to relate to this, given that you started off your journey with a startup. So the question is, how do you convince a customer when they're not agreeing to a deal?
Yeah, I think very good question. First thing, again, as I said, the business metrics and the customer metrics will help you there. If you squarely know what is the customer wanting as a final outcome, what is their KPI, right? For example, do they want to, improve the revenue? Do they want to finally cut down on the costs? Whoever you're talking to, right? That is number one thing. The number two is identifying the right person you're talking in your customer. If it is a B2B, especially, right? Like, are you talking to a base level user who has no decision making power and is afraid that they might lose their job because you're automating something, or you're talking to a senior person whose KPI is to bring in that improvement in the system, right? So identifying these two. And third is, once you have done these two, you should be able to paint a story or a vision for the user to visualize. Hey, this is the value. This is where you stand today, and here is where we can take you to with the help of my product. And I think when you paint that story in a very quantitative way, with an emotional connect also now, because you are actually, actually targeting their KPIs, right? And nothing more can be more important than that. So I think it will be easy to convince the deal. But remember, you'll always have bad days too. You will never have every customer get converted when you're talking to them first. So you need to have that patience and give yourself multiple chances to be able to have those conversations.
Thanks, Sonali. Maybe I'll take the last question, and this one is for you, Ranjini. I know you've answered this over the last 45 minutes, but maybe you can summarize. What is the role of customer data platforms in customer-centric product development?
Everything, right? So so see, honestly, I can't underscore this enough, right? And this is across every type of company which is there, right? And I'll give you simple examples, right? So say a customer is coming in, and you want to make sure that the customer gets his or her problems resolved ASAP, right? And that's going to result in better customer experience. That's going to reduce your cost. That's going to reduce manpower. That's going to be beneficial in all aspects, right? But if you think about it, say the customer's already done that research, right? In terms of, okay, is this solving my problem? Is B solving the problem? Is C solving the problem? And then comes over to you, and then on your URL itself, say he comes to your portal and says, okay, I have this issue, and someone, it could be a chatbot which is providing recommendations, or it could be an algorithm which is directing them to a person who's providing recommendations. But if those recommendations are also offering A, B, or C, then imagine the experience of the customer, right? First of all, he or she has spent that half an hour, 1 hour to say, okay, none of this works, so I want to reach out, and then you get the same recommendation. And this happens when there's that disconnect, right? Without having that overall perspective of what has that customer journey been. So absolutely, I think the short answer is the customer journey of what that person has done before he comes to your systems, to after he comes to your systems, to until he resolves that entire end-to-end customer journey can be made available once you have that information of the customer persona and the data across. And thereby having that is critical for you to understand the gaps in the persona. Where are you not understanding? Where are you not providing them the right experiences, right? Where in that journey, where in that micro journeys do you have gaps? So I think having that visibility is so critical, and it is absolutely almost foundational for you to build a customer-centric product development.
Absolutely. I mean, that's so spot on. There's this one question that's popped up 3 times, so I'll probably take this one and answer. It's okay. So it's around Domino's. So I guess I'll have to answer this. It says, give us some specific examples of technology interventions that you brought in with brands like Domino's and the Jubilant stable. especially when such brands have already exhibited high customer centricity since inception. Okay, so one thing that I would say is that no matter how big a brand you are, whether you started yesterday or 40 years back, it's absolutely imperative that you treat your customers with the most respect and importance every single day. Yeah. And so what got you there does not necessarily mean it's going to take you to the next level, right? You have to, at any stage of your organization, always have to solve these problems with, with the lens that Ranjini and Sonali spoke about, right? So understanding what are your customers' pain points, prioritizing them, and then solving for them in an iterative way by using an MVP approach, looking at metrics, seeing how does it make a difference to them, and speaking to them, right? If you talk about Domino's, right? Domino's is in the business of using technology to deliver pizzas in 30 minutes or less. Yeah. That is what brought attention almost 20 years back when it was launched in India. And so we have had maniacal focus on that, both from a technology, product, operations, sales standpoint. Yeah. But today, customers are just not happy with that itself, right? They want a great pizza at a great value ahead of time. And by the way, if they can get loyalty points, why not, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that there are a lot of things that we did, small things. For example, how can customers actually customize the pizza when they're ordering Domino's, right? Through the Domino's app, right? Or how can we show them the value that they get if they're ordering a certain kind of a meal, right? So instead of leaving it up to them that, okay, you get a 15% discount, can we make it much more easier for them to understand what is the saving they're having? And then actually recommending to them which is the payment method they should use, which would probably give them the maximum value, right? So this is part of helping them figure out that at the end of the day, they are getting value from Domino's, right? The second part is the whole delivery business, right? At the end of the day, if I have to spend 5 minutes just telling you where I'm located, it's a big pain point, right? So how can we use intelligence that we already have, right? And technology that's out there to kind of auto-populate to the extent possible and allow them to change, so that they can make it as precise as is possible for them with quick and simple user interfaces. Yeah. And then what then happens is, instead of the person coming in, maybe 200 meters from your place and giving you a call, he or she already knows where you are located and does a door delivery. There's no more delight to a person when the delivery happens without having to explain to someone the directions of getting there, right? So in a nutshell, there's so many things that technology can do, right? There's so many things that can be done by simplifying a product, but all of this only comes together when you have so much focus on the customer and you totally understand their pain points and prioritize and solve for them. Yeah. So I'll stop there. I think this has been a session where I've learned so much from Sonali and Ranjini. So thank you so much for sharing your pearls of wisdom and for sharing so many stories and insights. And I think Amit and NASSCOM, I think it's great on NASSCOM's behalf to be putting on these sessions and allowing so many people to come together and learn. I hope you guys have had a great interactive session and you learned a lot. And thanks again to Ranjini and Sonali. Over to you, Amit.
Thanks, Anurag. Thank you very much. I understand that the moderator's job is very difficult, that asking the right questions to experienced product leaders and getting maximum out of their wisdom in such a short time. Also keeping audience in the mind is a very tough job, and you walk that tightrope very well in this particular session and ask those beautiful questions. You very well said that we need to treat customers very respectfully, and as Mahatma Gandhi rightly said in his own speeches, that because of the customer we exist, to serve them we exist as a business, and we should never forget that. There are a lot of key takeaways. I think summarizing all is not quick, but I will just summarize very few pointers here learned from Sonali and Ranjani. Is that first thing is output versus outcome. We should not get mixed between the two, and we should always look at outcome, which can be measured through a NPS or a CS score. We should always look at efficiency and effectiveness, what users are looking from that perspective. For a startup, very good message is that don't build. Keep those milestones in the picture, and then see that how you want to take that multiple viewpoints and then build as a product together without spending too much of money on that. Ranjani always talk about, so Narayamuthi very famously said that I trust God, but bring the data to me, right? And that's where Ranjani was harping on that primarily, I think. And while talking about data, collecting that data, cleaning that data, enriching that, to get that 360-degree view of a particular customer is very, very important before you decide what is the customer centricity there. As a product managers, we need to be very moving from reactive or preemptive approach to a proactive approach in terms of addressing those market needs and customer needs. I think, and then we also talked about customer centric and product centric. Most of the time, we ourselves become a fall in love with our own products and start loving it to such level that we start forgetting whom we are serving in at the end. I think the very good pointers. If the time would have allowed me, we would have kept this session for another 1 hour to a certain extent. But thank you very much to all of you for this wonderful session. Thanks to the audience who is present there, and look forward to keep